What's good? What's good? What's good, folks? I hope that everybody's having a great start to their Monday. And today, we're going to be starting something a little bit different. We're going to explore some of my philosophy. And I wanted to get into this philosophy because I think that there is a lot of benefit for men to have their own philosophy, their own perspective, and own POV. And this also allows you to focus on yourself, to focus on how you want to show up in the world. And so, if you've been rocking with me for a little while, which many of you guys have been, then you know that every man, or I believe, and I sincerely believe we benefit from understanding that every man has a story and that the story soon becomes history or his story. And it all begins with our statement and style. And so many guys forget that every man has a story to tell, every one of us. But there are specifically four stories, or four chapters, or sections of your life that you're going to have to tell in order to be a complete man, in order to have a full understanding of yourself and how you want to show up. And that's really all being a complete man is. Now, we've heard, about guys being high value men. And I have my own perspective on that. You can't have value if you don't have values. Um, about us having, being qualified as men. But all of these things are really just perspectives and their narratives that people are creating around us. And so I want us to realize as men, first and foremost, we have to be aware of what we're saying to ourselves, what we are expressing to ourselves over and over and over again as statements, and how those create narratives, which ultimately become the stories that we tell. When we think about our personal life and our personal style, where we are is how we got there, right? But a lot of us don't think about the elements, the settings, the scenes, the plots, or the lack of planning and plots that put us in those positions, right? And so I wanted us to talk about first the four stories that every guy has to tell. Now, the first aspect of the story is that completeness, being the true full encompassment of who you're supposed to be. But the first story that we end up encountering oftentimes is going to be a story of leadership. And I know some of you guys are saying, like, I've never leaded anybody in my life. Well, that could be true, right? That could be true if you're not leading yourself. But every man has the opportunity to create leadership for himself. And if you're a young lady, you can create leadership for yourself, but primarily talking to the fellas here. And so I remember asking a guy who could have been a mentor, could have been a person that I would come to for mentorship, but that ended up not being the case. And part of it was because when I asked him if he could assist me, if he could help me, guide me into being a leader, he said, "Well, I can't teach you how to be a leader. And that's impossible. I can't teach somebody how to be a leader." And that contradicted every personal development coach, every business person, every person in the military that I've seen, right? That leaders not only lead by example, but they also lead by development. They lead by investment. They lead by focalized attention on a particular individual and helping them understand and observe different scenes and settings so that they can create a perspective. And that leadership will then allow you to maneuver in a way that sets you apart, right? And the great thing about leadership is that everybody's going to have different areas where they lead. There's going to be some guys who lead literally by their physical presence. They are imposing, and this is why when we're talking about style, we either want to accentuate that for certain elements in an authoritative situation. You want to look like the authority. You want to look like the man with the plan. You want to look like the man who has a clear direction in where you're going, right? And so you want to look distinguished. You want to look thoughtful. You want to look intentional in how you are putting your look together. And then you want to be mindful about where you're stepping out and how you're going to show up in those spaces. This is why a lot of times when we're talking about those leadership roles, this is usually going to take place in a professional setting. So you have to have your professional looks. Everybody's not going to be in a suit and tie, especially in modern day society. That's just not what you're going to see. But how do you exemplify and exude leadership in those spaces, even when you are not in those formalized spaces? How do you set yourself apart? Well, I was listening to Tony Robbins, and he said, one, you have to make a decision. You have to be clear about your decision. And he was like, he was talking to this military general, and he was interviewing or actually, he wasn't interviewing, he was working under his mentor, and they had a very serious decision to make in the 90s for, some Middle Eastern conflict. And so he heard both sides of his military council, and both arguments and compelling insight. And then they said, we will have two briefs, briefs that information that they have to go over. And he had 24 hours to make a decision. So he goes in the next day and he makes a decision. He says, "Hey, we're going to go this way. Execute the plan." And so the guy who was now a general, he was like, I asked the general, I think it was General Admiral, he's like, how did you make that decision? He said a decision needed to be made, so I made it, right? And I stuck to it. I was committed to it. And in that same space, without the amount of seriousness to it, you just have to make a decision of the type of person, but also ultimately the type of man that you're going to be when you step out. And a lot of guys don't make that decision because that decision is then going to require a certain level of commitment and consistency. It's going to require a space where you potentially could be misunderstood or you could be misrepresented in the understanding that people experience you with. And being a leader means you are willing to take the step out and not be appreciated and or recognized for what it is that you are conveying in those spaces, right? And so when you do that, everybody's not going to understand you. It can be a very isolating experience in the beginning because you're creating the path and nobody else is following. This is often what happens with trendsetters, right? These trendsetters not trying to be the people that other people follow. They're just doing themselves. They're following their own lead. They're following their own insights. They're following their own intuition and they're saying this is what works. This happens after having the ability to observe what is working and what is not working. So the best way to do that, they say, is to learn from somebody else's mistakes. This is why we have coaches. This is why we have consultants. This is why I have, the opportunity to have a position that helps fellas, is because they're like, I don't want to make these mistakes. And what they inadvertently end up doing is they humble themselves to follow somebody else's lead to put them in a space of leadership in their own environment. So a guy will come to me and say, Hey, bro, I ain't gonna hold you. I don't really know what to do about my style. I don't know how to put a look together, put an ensemble together. I have these important dates that are coming up, and I really want to look my best. And there's a certain level of courage in the humility to say, I don't know, especially when it comes to men. And that is the ultimate sign of leadership because every person in business will often say, I do not want to be the smartest person in the room in my business. I want smarter people around me, proficient in their field and in their department, to be smarter than me. That's one less thing that I have to think about. And so as we get into this space of leadership, we understand that just because we are the protagonists of our own story, just because we are the main character of our own story, that doesn't mean that our co-characters or the people that we are going to engage with on a consistent basis are not going to have importance. They're not going to be somebody that we need to leverage or goodwill, leverage for insight, leverage for advice. And so the first thing that you have to have a story for is leadership. And leadership has its own process, as you can see, following somebody else's lead. And then you start to figure out where you maybe disagree or where you move to the side and begin to break off and find your own awareness. And so when I'm dealing with individuals, I oftentimes will dress them, will get them squared away, they'll look great, and then they start to refine their own style. They have the baseline and the foundation for how they want to show up, but now they're starting to find those subtle nuances that separate them from the Ivy look or the Ivy look that are all encompassed in this American University persona, right? And you're seeing these small little touch points that separate them from the crowd, so much so that they become leaders for other people. Now they got young cats in their office or young cats in their community, in their neighborhood, or in a big brother, big sister program, and they have little brothers, that these people are starting to ask and inquire about where they started to obtain their style from, right? So you have to have this leadership position, and that leadership requires thoughtfulness, perspective, and the awareness that you are going to influence other people. And if you are unable to influence other people, I would question whether or not you really believe in your perspective on life or your philosophy on life, right? And if you guys are interested on how to create a philosophy for your life as well as your personality, or I'm sorry, as well as your personal style, words got mixed up there, then let me know in the comments and we'll have that conversation as well. So you have your leadership position, right? This is why we always say you got to be the king of your castle. You have to stand on your square because you have to have an awareness of who you are, what you're representing, and what you are following, what you are subscribing to, what you are adhering to when it comes to your personal style. The next space that you have to be is a warrior, right? You have to be diligent about protecting that philosophy, about protecting space, about protecting who you are and what you want to represent. And I love that concept. And if you guys have been rocking with me before, you've heard me talk about the king, warrior, magician, lover principle, right? I always like to reformulate that to talk about the king, warrior, lover, magician principle. But these are all concepts that every man is going to have to play. And so when we move into the warrior space, a lot of guys think about warriors as combatants, as people who are going to fight. But if you read The Art of War, if you read the 33 Strategies of War, Sun Tzu, his ultimate goal was to create the ability to fight without fighting, to be more strategic, to be a chess master of understanding situations and strategies for those situations to show up at your best, right? Now, it's important for you to have those abilities, right? Bruce Lee said, far better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war, right? But he also said that in Enter the Dragon, if you guys don't remember, great movie, right? He says that this is the art of fighting without fighting, right? I don't want to have to incur violence in order to get my point across or in order to succeed or to progress, right? And not necessarily the biggest advocate of Andrew Tate, but I do know that he has some truths. And one of the things that he said is when you're dealing with somebody who is violent, violence does not have ethics, doesn't have morality. They're not gonna say like, let me square up with you and do utilize my martial arts against your martial arts or my boxing skills against your jujitsu or martial arts skills, right? They're gonna pick up a bat and they're gonna try to hurt you. We have to be strategic in how we protect the things that we value, right? The things that make us valuable. And so when I started thinking about this, I started thinking about when it comes to our personal style, how do you protect your presentation? How do you protect it so that you can ultimately project your presentation? And a lot of guys don't think about being strategic about the spaces that they find themselves in. When I first started dancing, well, I remember we used to still try to go out to like these hood clubs, and turn up and do all these things. And I think I've told this story before. I'm gonna tell it again in a different context. I came across this young lady. We were at this club in Atlanta. We turned up. This was when Waka Flocka Flame was first coming out. Was that guy? And so we're at this club, and there's this cute chick. And if you were raised back in the late '90s, early 2000s, we didn't do a whole lot of talking. We just walked up behind the young lady and started dancing. See what happened, right? And she would give you the two beats and then look back at you. And if she was rocking with you, she'd keep on dancing. And if not, she would walk away or friends pull her away. Do y'all still do that? Let me know in the comments if y'all still if that's still how it plays out. But I remember she did her little two bops, look back, it's cute, and she kept dancing. But like as soon as the song ended, she turned around and she was like, "What you doing in here?" I was like, "What you mean? Like good time, walk the fuck flame, tearing up the club, this is dope." And she was like, yeah, but what you doing in here?" Now, mind you, I had on a blazer, uh, button-up shirt, a pair of trousers, and some loafers, while everybody else was in snapbacks, or they were in fitteds at the time, jerseys, the Jabot jeans and Air Force Ones. So we looked mad at a place. That was me and two other homies, right? But we looked mad at a place. And I remember she kind of clowned me. She didn't really clown me, but she kind of clowned me. And at the time, I was like, man, I can be anywhere I want to be in the city. And I could be. Like there was nobody who stopped me. But I realized the types of young ladies that I wanted to interact with, I couldn't really get their attention in those spaces because it wasn't the proper environment. I hadn't planned or strategized for how I could show up more attractive in those spaces, right? Because that wasn't even the type of lady that I was looking for. I wasn't protecting my well-being because at the time there was a very well-known organization here that if you weren't really a part of, you could find yourself in a violent situation. Not because they were doing anything, but because they had people who were trying to get on and were willing to do whatever to get on because this organization was making a ton of money, right? And so we would find ourselves in these different situations that weren't going to be beneficial to us and also weren't safe. And this is where I talk to a lot of guys who have some sensible character, right? How they're showing up and what they want to represent when they do. And they'll meet a young lady who will be like, he's boring. Like they'll tell them some stuff like, he's boring. He just always wants to do the right thing. And you think that's crazy, but I've heard, especially now, more than ever, like these criticisms about guys who want to have who have a system, who have a process, right? That these guys are boring. And they don't realize that they need to protect that perspective. They need to protect that philosophy. They need to protect that presentation for the young lady and for the people that are going to most benefit from that and that will then benefit them, right? Because again, this is your overarching story. So you want beneficial co-characters in that story who are going to continue to promote and present and edify your legacy, your story. You want those co-characters to be able to lift you up and say, nah, like he that dude in this area, he kills it. And the same thing that you can do in their given field as well. So that you all are showing up as winners, as the kings, as the leaders that you are. So you have to be strategic about what that represents, where you show up in these given situations, right? So if you're going to protect your presentation, it can't be just you being in bad situations. You also want to pay attention to the places that are going to damage your items or are going to be heavy work on your items. A lot of guys don't think about the effects of a heavy wear on delicate items. I remember I had the opportunity to get this cashmere suit. I think I talked about this last week, but I wasn't strategic in getting it. I loved the suit. It was a beautiful burgundy color. It was dope. This was before everybody was really getting on that burgundy train. And it was luxe because it was cashmere. The problem was is I wasn't strategic about how I could utilize that piece. So I could really only wear it two or three times before it got damaged. right? I wasn't protecting the presentation and being mindful of when and where I would wear that. And in that same space, a lot of you as guys, myself included, we will go out and get super nice things, not being strategic with the awareness of how we wear our items. You're not protecting your presentation because you beat up, pause, your pieces over and over and over again. You don't realize, oh, I need something that can sustain wear and tear, right? If you're not a meticulous guy, if you're not a person who really takes time to care for your items, you're not hanging up your clothes right after you get them. And you should be, fellas. Like, hang up your pants, hang up your jacket, right? Let it air out, all those things. But if you're not doing those things, or you find yourself wearing stuff that is too tight, right? And so you can't protect the pants because they're prone to rip. But now you have to be strategic about getting a second pair so that you have something that's still going to suit your overall look, right? You have to begin to protect your presentation because everybody is going to have a story of challenge. And the more strategic, the more prepared we can find ourselves, the better we are in that presentation, in that chapter of our lives where we have to show up and fight those insecurities and fight those statements, those negative statements that we find in our head, and to fight the time, to fight the lack of resources, right? Sometimes the challenge that we have to war against, that we have to fight against, is lack of resources because we're in a valley for a time, right? We're still trying to navigate. Uh, you have to navigate how you're wearing your pieces, right? Because you may need to show up at your best when you're feeling at your worst. 3D Modern Guy says you must limit the amount of times that you send your items to the dry cleaners. Totally agree. You got to be very systematic, very plan oriented, very prepared for even how you care for your items. As a side, guys, do not take your items to the dry cleaner to be dry cleaned. If you're taking suits, they should really only go once a year, if that. I really don't recommend taking if you have like a wool suit and you've invested some money into it. It's 100% wool. You don't really have to take it to the dry cleaners. You can just air dry it. Wool has a natural lanolin, which is an oil factor that will naturally deodorize its own piece. I used to tell guys to put it into the shower, and then I learned actually that you don't have that room that you can just sit your jacket out and let it aerate, clear, and remove it. The smells, your body odor, and or any perfumes that you may be wearing, will handle. The only thing that I probably would take to the dry cleaner still to this day is my pants, because sometimes those are going to have much heavier wear than suits will. Definitely than will sport coats. So all those things I'll steam, and if I ever get a stain on them, I'll have recommendation by Thrifty Modern Guy on how to protect not only yourself but your clothing in that space. And for that matter, you also want to protect your shoes. Are you getting your shoes resoled? Are you shining? Are you protecting items so that they have staying power and can show up as your protection and you need them most? These are to think about when it comes to that aspect, that story, with that will, because those are the conversations where you will have the. This is when we start having the conversation that the victors will write the history books. This is where like the victors goes the spoils. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So if you want to move into this next section, this next space of being the lover, right? Then you don't have to worry about the approach because you already are ready, right? And this brings up a conversation again of a story that I've heard one too many times. The guy see this young lady, and it's the lady of their dreams. It's the lady of Miss Right Now, if you will. And they hesitate. And when you ask them, like, "Yo, why you hesitate?" Their presentation, the gift that they had to give to this young lady was off. There was something kept from that initial approach. And whether it was a pleasurable approach, a productive one, or one that was going to have longevity and staying power, they missed out on that opportunity. And before we continue there, I want to do a brief is to be a lover is. To be a lover is about being attracted to somebody else, right? So the attraction is the initial that's the thing that initially pulls us to somebody. And it's important to remember that attraction is not limited to the physical attributes of an individual, right? The physical attributes of a young lady. There have been numerous times where I found myself attracted to women who have cuteness. They're cute, right? But I'm not overly aroused or turned on by them. But I am aroused, stimulated by their presence, the way that they move, their style, and look good even after the clothes come off, right? Or the lights go off. Those things are still those things still proceed outside of like the physical styling, but the way that they be much more attractive. It's going to be much more magnetic. And this is what I say when I was single. Like, yo, she moves me, I'm going to move because I don't want to miss whatever that magnetism was. Now, mind you, all the young ladies that were that were magnetic were not tens. There's plenty of young ladies who were probably like seven and a half, eights, beautiful young ladies in their own right, but weren't necessarily the most physically maximum, right? They weren't the highest when it came to the physical, but there were these different elements that attracted me to them. And so you have the attractiveness. Comes into play is attention, right? Can they keep your attention and can you keep their attention? That's mutual. And then also, what attention do you find yourself paying intention to? Or I've gotten with the young lady, and then all we have is the physicality. We don't conversations. I don't feel enlightened after talking to her. I don't feel refreshed after to her. Cody Sanchez, who's a business professional, she made a great analogy. She said when it came to friendships, and this is true when it comes to friendships, you can have friendships. People, I love the way that he is in the community. I love that the way that he is in our community. And non-sexually, you're like, yo, this is somebody I want somebody that I can benefit from and I can be a benefit to, right? So there's a natural attraction there in that space in friendship. And so what Sanchez was saying was that you have couch friends and then you have running friends. And she said the running friends are the people that after you talk to them, you just feel all of this energy, you feel all of this good nature, you feel all of these wonderful things. And then you have the couch friends. And the couch friends, they have such a nasty disposition. They such a bad insight on the world that you feel like you just got to go sit on the couch after you're done talking to them because they just drain you, right? And in those same spaces, those who are we paying our and a lot of times we'll find that the superficial things may catch our attention, but they very rarely will keep it. And so the same thing is true when it comes to our personal style and the things that we love and the things that we pay intention to. A lot of times when I'm dealing with guys in the custom space, especially when we are dealing and building their custom capsule wardrobe, they find themselves attracted to the loud, extra, vibrant colors that are going to pop. I use it to walk individuals back because their first thought is, I want to be seen, right? But then they don't think about the attention that that is going to draw. So I always make this analogy. A lot of guys want the finest girl in the room, right? You look at the Instagram young ladies and they're like, oh man, I love to get with this chick. Now, mind you, this chick is super attractive, beautiful. She got the dress. She's kind of posed, with her booty out, all those good things, right? All things. But then when you start paying attention and the intention behind the attention, you start to recognize that that's not the type of move or individual that you want to be with. The reason being is because that person always has to be in front of the camera. That person is going to attract a certain type of attention that you may not be down with. That person is always getting different types of attention. So this doesn't mean that you can't be with the most beautiful young lady, but you have to pay attention to how is she just pretty, or does she have the components of beauty, not only in aesthetic, and does that person then add to your attention? Because again, person has started to pay attention to how she moves, how she engages, who she interacts with, and how she interacts when she does. And in those same spaces, when we start talking about your clothing, you're picking fabrication because it is going to be beneficial to your life. It's going to drape well and be structured, give you form, and allow you to interact in different scenes and scenarios with different and create those attractions of magnetic energy that are going to help proper bonds that will keep you growing and evolving. Those are the things that we have to start to notice that a lot of times those things aren't loud. The guys who have been in this minute, a lot of times you start to see them become much more somber with their dress. They don't have some people that they can pop out and show fellas right when they need to. But grand scheme of things and the grand scope of things, you start to see that different when it comes to how they show up. They don't need to be loud and ostentatious and extra. These people say, look at me," because they understand that with that comes certain a certain price and cost that they may not be willing to engage in. They'll also realize that in this space, when you start to think about the things that you really find attraction to, that you can be attentive to, and that you have that keeps your attention, these things start to align with your moves and how you want to move. And you start to realize, oh, I don't need all of these extra things. Right now, in the sartorial space, a lot of guys will still go out and buy suits and ties and shirts and all things, which are beautiful. It's dope. But they realize very quickly, and so they've wasted money because they don't need this item. They don't need, they now feel obligated to wear them, but they don't feel like themselves because it's not aligned with their life. And so this is where a lot of guys have come to me and said, Michael, how do I find that in between space? How do I find the business professional and business casual commingling? And this is when we start talking to them about different things that they can wear and how to add sophistication to casual or leisure style. And then how to add a elevated expression when it comes to business professional space. And then they got their formal offerings when they need it. But the average guy today, even in the highest level of professional spaces, whether it's financial and or legal, unless they're in court, they're not in suits. I can't say how many of my lawyer friends and lawyer clients that we talk to, or how many of my doctor or physician friends that we talk to, or how many of the people in the financial field that we talk to that are like, yeah, I'm not wearing suits. This doesn't serve me. So it's not aligned with where they are, and that's probably the most difficult part is finding people that are aligned with you and then removing yourself from the people who aren't aligned with your attitude or your philosophy and perspective that we were talking about, right? Your overarching story. That can be the most challenging thing because it's not about the good or bad or that it doesn't fit you. It actually you like physically or fits you on paper, but it doesn't fit your life. I was dating a young lady who was the perfect girlfriend. I always used to tell her, like, you're the perfect girlfriend. She just wasn't aligned with my life. She knew what to say, she knew what to talk about, knew how to be right. She read apparently in my mind, the How to Be a Girlfriend books, right? She had aced all those assessments. But when it came really being attentive to listening to me so that she could align herself with my life, she could formulate the awareness of what my needs need a lot, but the things that I did need, I needed. Right. And so for me to separate myself from her, because I was like, yo, she's a good woman. And a lot of us as guys, I just wanted a good woman, right? She's good, but she's not good for me. She's good to me for the most part, but she's not good. And so you have to start thinking about some of those things. You could go into a store and you could find a, and you could be like, man, this is dope, you know, a dope 3-piece suit, and I work in tech. It's dope 3-piece suit, man. I kill it in this. But you work from home in tech. You don't really like going out to anything dressy like that. But the store's 50% off. You got a $3,000 jacket for 1,500, or $300 dollar 3-piece suit for $15. Are you buying it? You buying it? Let me know in the comments. You like, yeah, I'm getting that thing, right? But then it just sits in your closet because it wasn't aligned with your versus you finding a shirt jacket or a great that works for you, that is aligned with your moves, right? You can throw the blazer on at work with the blazer on with this pop, a button up. You throw it on with the turtleneck. You have all these different. It now has utility, right? And you can leverage those things. And you'll find through that you start seeing transformation. The spaces, place, and point of view starts to change because now you have a true understanding of what it is that you want to represent. When you start that, you find leading the spaces, you created the path, the footsteps, and the footprints that will allow people to get further than they had without you because they have a direction. You are creating that openness because of your courageousness and strategy to love yourself, right? To be appreciative, attractive, and aligned with who you are and how you're going to show up to be the best version of yourself. So I gotta go. I want you to try to fit you. And if it fits you well, I want you to consider the story that you're telling and the 4 components that are comprised of it. And are you showing up as the leader, strategist, and warrior that loves themselves and is ready to transform the world? If you are, of your style looks, send me a DM with your style and philosophy because you never maybe something that's going to benefit somebody else. You can always hit and you'll be able to find me there. Leave me some comments. I have been saying you are great, right? So now all you have to do is show up and show up style, remembering that dress is a man's state of mind. So yes, you should always dress to address your life. Yes, sir. I'll see you next week. Peace.